Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me today. To start off, I would like to draw your attention to the link below this video. This will take you to the Social Security Administration's life expectancy calculator. Today we will be discussing a new type of retirement plan, and while we discuss that, I want us to be thinking of how much nearer to retirement we are than we think, if in fact we will ever be able to retire. And that's partly why we're here today to discuss the Sustainable Profit Sharing Plan. It's a new view on retirement. There are many different types of retirement plans. You have 401ks and IRAs, but there's one plan that is becoming rarer and rarer to find, especially in the private sector, and that's a defined benefits plan, also known as a pension plan. And Julia Kagan defines that for us as an employer sponsored retirement plan where employee benefits are computed using a formula that considers several factors such as length of employment, salary history. It's not something that you, the employee, contribute to, only the employer, and as such, they bear all the risk of um, of of offering that plan and maintaining it. So, because employers are solely responsible for their retirement plans, they are, of course, becoming less and less popular. Since 1984, we've seen them rapidly declining and increasingly being declared insolvent. This also impacts Americans' abilities to save for retirement. They no longer have this plan in which they can fall back on. In fact, 1 in 3 Americans has nothing saved for retirement, as we can see in the graphic here provided by Seeking Alpha. Another reason that Americans aren't able to save for retirement is the high cost of housing and low wages. In fact, the federal minimum wage hasn't been increased since 2009 when it was increased to $7.25 an hour. It's 11 years of staying exactly the same. And as such, employees are unable to save for their retirement at any meaningful rate. Well, what has been done to combat that? What solutions have been tried? Let's dive in on that. The largest impact on pension reform has been the passage of the PPA, the Pension Protection Act of 2006, which was signed into law by President George W. Bush. This sought to accomplish a few things. Its main goal was to hold companies accountable that underfunded their existing plans, hold them accountable to their pensioners who are relying on them to have been good stewards of their resources. It also increased the contribution limits to IRAs and 401ks, also introduced safe harbor rules and automatic enrollment. We'll dive into a little bit of those definitions here on the next slide. So what are safe harbor rules? In addition to all the other optional rules that we'll go over in a moment, safe harbor rules allow an employer to contribute to employees' retirement plans even though the employee is not. The other rule or option is the basic match, and we see on the side here a chart provided by Guideline, which is a 401k service provider. Just a few examples of what that match looks like. For example, if you contribute 6% of your salary, the company will match that 6% completely. So it's essentially you're putting in 12% of your pay into this retirement plan. The next option is automatic enrollment, and that's pretty much what it sounds like. An employer will automatically enroll all of their eligible employees into the retirement plan. And this sounds great in theory, but put yourself in the shoes of one of the workers who has a minimum wage job, making that $7.25 an hour. If all of a sudden you realize $50 is missing from your paycheck, that's a light bill that might not get paid. That's dinner for the next 3 days that you might not get to eat because you weren't expecting that. And in those situations, every penny of your budget is accounted for. So not really the best for some of those from for some of us on the lower income scales. So what can we do about this? What's the solution? That is where the Sustainable Profit Sharing Plan comes in, or the SIPSIP. In this plan, an employer will make a profit sharing contribution each fiscal quarter to a tax deferred plan that's held in trust for the plan participants, i.e., you. Um, the idea behind this plan of putting in the profit sharing This will encourage the loyalty of companies' human capital. The harder you work for the company, the longer you work there, the larger share you have in the overall rewards of that company. You work hard, you should reap some of those rewards. And in doing so, this creates a culture of inward and upward growth and long term stability. You know you're going to be working at the same company for the next 15 years. You're going to end up retiring from there. And as such, you will have this plan to fall back on. And off to the side here, we see just a visual representation of the bullet points of my own devising, just showing how, as the loyalty of the human capital increases and upward stability and growth increase, so do the profits of the company. Well, how does this plan work? What are the nuts and bolts of that? So, after 5 years of working with a company, you are fully vested in the funds that they have input into the plan. And we see a graph off to the side, or a chart off to the side from Morningstar.com, just giving an example of what that vesting schedule, as it's called, might look like. Let's say you leave the company after 5 years. That's perfectly fine. You have several options with which to retrieve your funds. You can have a lump sum payment, take everything at once, ad hoc payments, so as needed, or installment payments, either monthly, quarterly, or yearly. The one caveat to that is, though, once you have depleted those funds, that's it. That account is finished. Now, let's say you stay with the company until you retire. After all, that's the point of this, right? You want to be able to retire and rely on one single plan to see you through. You have the same options. You can deplete the funds in one lump sum, take ad hocs or installments. Few caveats with this, though. And this is where the sustainability of the plan comes into play. How will it always be funded? How can we always rely on that? Once you retire, you will continue to receive yearly profit sharing contributions from the company. You work to build that company to the point you deserve to continue to share in what you help create. Now, as we saw with the Social Security calculator that we used earlier, the older you get, the less you are expected to live, the lower your life expectancy. So each year, your life expectancy will be recalculated, and you will receive less and less of those profits. Well, how are we going to get the plan in place? How are we going to get this started? We would be, first of all, needing to draft up the summary plan description, sort of the owner's manual, the nuts and bolts of how the plan works, and present that to the American Retirement Association. The ARA are America's leading representing body for retirement professionals, and also leading lobbying agency. And they would put those powers to good use. They would introduce the plan to the Employee Benefit Securities Commission, and then any legislation that would be needed hopefully would be passed to amend ERISA, which is the act governing retirement plans, or the tax code as needed. Once that plan has been offered, how are we going to know that it works? We're going to use 10 companies over 10 years to pilot this plan, and we'll take a look at their profits and retention rates for employees and yearly plan testing results, and compare that to 10 years later, and that will show us how well this plan has performed. So in conclusion, pensions are a thing of the past. They're rapidly declining. As I mentioned, they're being declared insolvent at an enormous rate. So we can't rely on them. What's going to lead us through, and what's going to help us to be able to retire with any sense of security and comfort? And that's going to be the SIPSIP, the Sustainable Profit Sharing Plan. So I would urge you to petition your local chapters of the ARA, get in touch with your human resource professionals who may themselves be members of the ARA, and see what we can do to get this plan on its feet, and at least get the ball moving forward to discuss that with the powers that be that can actually make this happen, and help us actually be able to meet those retirement goals that I'm sure we all have. And here we see some references. If you have any questions regarding sources that I might have used, they can be found here. I do thank you for your time, and happy retirement planning.